Hello and welcome to episode 9 of our journey through William Shakespeare's Macbeth. Last time we finished off Act 1. We saw that Macbeth had been convinced that he had to commit regicide in order to seize the throne. Today we will look at the start of Act 2. Macbeth is about to set that plan into action. He is creeping towards Duncan's chambers where the king is soundly asleep. He's about to stab the king while he sleeps and commit regicide, the most evil crime imaginable in Jacobean England. Let's see how that goes for him. In Act 2, Scene 1. A quick reminder on annotation to start us off. I will be annotating general plot points in green, contextual factors in blue, and writer's craft in red. Okay, we start Act 2, Scene 1. Immediately, Shakespeare is trying to create a sense of foreboding, an idea that something bad is about to happen. We already know what this bad thing is going to be. It's going to be the murder of Duncan by Macbeth. We know it's night already, but now it's really late. Everyone is in bed. It's around midnight now, so it's really dark, it's really quiet. The only people awake are Banquo and Fleance. Perhaps they're a little bit worried about Macbeth's intentions, and that's why they're not in bed. Banquo then develops this atmosphere a little bit more. He talks about the idea of candles being out, so you can't really see what's going on around you. Building up this idea that there could be something hiding in the shadows. We know obviously that something is Macbeth, which we'll talk about in a second. But it could also be the idea of hiding true intentions. We've seen that in Act 1 with the idea of appearance versus reality, but we're building on that even more here. Banquo's exhausted. He's fought in a battle, remember, then he's gone to see the king, and now he's come to Macbeth's castle for this banquet. All of this has happened in quite a short period of time. He's absolutely exhausted, but he's scared to go to sleep. He's been dreaming of the witches since he saw them with Macbeth in Act 1. People at the time thought that bad dreams, when they had them, were caused by demons or supernatural power. So Shakespeare's hinting at that contextual fact here. Then we start to build on this idea that Macbeth and Banquo are opposites. They were completely together in Act 1 when they were fighting on the battlefield. Then they saw the witches, and since then they've been going in further and further opposite directions. We've seen Macbeth and we've seen Lady Macbeth call on evil spirits to help them. Banquo here calls on the gods. Then Macbeth appears, he's got a servant with him who's carrying a torch. Banquo immediately asks for his sword. Now, there's no suggestion that Banquo has seen Macbeth here, but we're really building an idea that Banquo is uneasy about something. He doesn't know who's coming, and his first thought is that he's probably going to need to defend himself. Then, once he's got his sword ready, he checks for who's there. We know that Macbeth is probably the person that Banquo needs protecting from most. But here that doesn't appear to have clicked into Banquo's brain yet. So there's some more dramatic irony there from Shakespeare. And then some more dramatic irony as well. The audience are at this point questioning if Macbeth is anyone's friend but his own. Then Banquo talks about Duncan a little bit. We've got a real jarring atmosphere in this section of the scene. We know that it's night time, we know where Macbeth is going, we know what he's about to do. But then Banquo talks about how happy Duncan has been in this evening. He's given Macbeth and Lady Macbeth great gifts. Ironic there from Shakespeare, we know that Macbeth's about to kill Duncan. It also shows Macbeth and Lady Macbeth in an even more evil light. Duncan's been so good to the couple, but they don't care. They're about to kill him to seize his crown. Macbeth just openly lying to Banquo's face here. He talks about how they've done all that they can to make Duncan feel welcome. He's hiding his true intentions there. This is appearance versus reality again. Although there's also a sense of dramatic irony there as well. Like Macbeth and Lady Macbeth have tried to make Duncan feel welcome, but it's not because they want him to be happy, it's because they want him to not suspect what they're about to do. We then go immediately from Macbeth being duplicitous and lying into Banquo being really honest about something. He's honest about how the witches have affected him since they met them. This place here in the play is potentially where Banquo's suspicion towards Macbeth starts to take hold of him. However, he could just be talking about Macbeth becoming Thane of Cawdor. Then we're right back to Macbeth talking, and again he's telling lies. This time he's lying to someone who was his best friend, so it shows just how good of a liar he actually is. He says that he hasn't thought of the witches at all, but the audience know that he's thought of little else since that meeting. It's the meeting with the witches and what they've told him that has led to him contemplating committing regicide, that's led to him having to be convinced by Lady Macbeth, and now has led to him making this journey towards Duncan's chambers. He then says that if Banquo wants to talk about it further at a later time, that they can do. And that is potentially just Macbeth trying to get rid of Banquo, trying to get him out of the way so that he can progress to Duncan's chambers to commit the crime. Banquo again isn't particularly honest here. Banquo's not very keen on meeting with Macbeth to have this conversation. The relationship between the two is completely falling apart at this point. Then we have an example of Macbeth being equivocal. We've seen that from the witches and we've seen that from Lady Macbeth to some extent. He's mirroring their characteristics here. He alludes to what he's doing, but he doesn't actually say it outright. He's telling Banquo what he's doing without actually telling him, and he's hoping that Banquo will support him in this. But Banquo, because he's a good, honourable person, remember there's a link between Banquo and King James, so that is why Banquo is shown in such a good light throughout. But Banquo, because he is honourable, he rejects Macbeth here. Macbeth is not an honourable person, and Banquo isn't going to side with someone who's not honourable. Then we see that Banquo and Fleance have gone, they've left the stage, so it's just Macbeth and it's just this servant who are left on stage at this point. Macbeth then sets the plan into motion. The bell that he talks about here is the signal for him to proceed and end Duncan's life. And then the servant leaves him alone on stage as well. It is when he's alone that this madness seems to take hold of him immediately. He's hallucinating here. And that is either through the guilt that he feels for what he's about to do to Duncan, or it's a possibility that it's a supernatural conjuring. There's no evidence to say that the witches haven't conjured this dagger in the air. We know that they can control the weather, that they can appear and disappear at will. There's nothing to say that they can't make other objects appear and disappear as well. And this hallucination or this conjuring of the dagger immediately affects Macbeth in a big way. And Shakespeare here uses lots of questions throughout this section to show that Macbeth's state of mind is fragmented. He's uncertain. And this uncertainty is shown further because he immediately says, "Come," which is an imperative. And then straight after that, he follows up by almost begging the knife. So "come" is telling the dagger what to do. Then "let me clutch thee," he's begging the dagger there. That switch between being in control and being completely not in control in such a short section of dialogue really shows how much Macbeth is losing his mind at this point. Then we reinforce that a bit further with some more questions. At this point here, Macbeth seems uncertain whether the dagger is even real or if it's a hallucination. The dagger, though, whether it's real or not, is pointing towards Duncan's chambers. But it's important to note that it's just showing him the way that he was going. He was already going in that direction. It's not the dagger that's convinced him because his mind was already made up. This bit's quite interesting. So the dudgeon is the handle of a knife. And Macbeth here can already envision, he can already see and imagine the blood that's about to be on his knife from what he's about to do to Duncan. There's going to be blood on the blade because he's going to stab the king to death. But there will also be blood on the handle. And because it is on the handle, it will get onto his hands. And we know that the motif of blood represents guilt. And that is what is being addressed here. The blood from the dudgeon will get onto Macbeth's hands. It will also be on Lady Macbeth's hands in a few scenes' time. Then at this point, we've seen not long ago that he wasn't sure whether the dagger was real. But then here, like 10 lines later, he recognises that it's not real. It's a hallucination. He repeats the word business, and we've seen he and Lady Macbeth talk about the crime that they're about to commit as a business. They have to take the emotion out of it. Because if they take the emotion out of it, it seems like a lesser crime to them. The plosive B sounds as well are alliterative. It almost sounds violent when you say it quickly. And that links to the violence of the murder that Macbeth is about to commit. We then come back to the idea of nature. What is natural, what is not natural? Sleep is one of the most natural things possible. It could be linked to sleep here. Macbeth is the only one who's awake at this point, and from here on he's going to struggle to sleep constantly, as is Lady Macbeth. But it could be another link to the natural order. The great chain of being is about to be killed by Macbeth, because Macbeth is about to kill God's chosen ruler on earth, who is Duncan. He's about to subvert that great chain of being and that natural order. Then we get a bit more on sleep. Disrupted sleep is going to be common from this point on for Macbeth and for Lady Macbeth. But we've already seen that in Act 1 through the little anecdote that the witches were talking about with the sailor. There's also a direct link to witchcraft in this bit. Hecate was the queen of witchcraft, and also she's linked closely to the idea of crossroads. I think that's a really interesting point to talk about for this here, because this section, this scene, is Macbeth's moral crossroads. He can either turn one way, kill Duncan and proceed down that path, or he could turn the other way. He could not kill Duncan and proceed forward as an honourable hero. This point here is Macbeth's Volta. It's his turning point. Everything that happens from now on in the play comes from this scene. Back to nature now with some animals. Wolves, though, prey on the innocent, just like Macbeth is about to do to Duncan. In literature, they're also linked to the idea of loyalty. And Macbeth, we've seen throughout Act 1, is notoriously and famously loyal. He's been loyal to Duncan and to Scotland. He's risked his life for these ideas. But that loyalty is about to change from them to himself, to Lady Macbeth, and then later on to the supernatural. Tarquinius Superbus, he was a usurper in ancient Rome. He killed his father-in-law in order so that he could become the ruler. He could take the throne himself. Once he'd taken the throne, he killed lots of senators because they doubted him, they were suspicious of him, and he killed them in order to gain more power. Once he got that power, he ruled over Rome for years as a tyrant. And that's a really nice link that you can make between the context and between Macbeth's character. Macbeth is going to reflect those ideals more and more as the play progresses from here. Then we go from quite a complicated contextual point to something really simple. Just a basic simile linked directly to the idea of the supernatural. Macbeth was moved swiftly and unseen as a ghost would in order to complete the task he's about to do. We're then introduced to a theme that's going to become really important as the play progresses, the idea of good versus evil. There's going to be an explicit distinction between people who are good and people who are evil from this point. Macbeth wants to hide from everything and everyone here. He's hiding his intentions, as we've already seen, but he's also physically creeping around in the dark. He's hiding himself as well. You can hide from anything, but you cannot hide from nature, and you cannot hide from God, because they see everything. Nature and God represent the ideas that are good throughout the play. Anyone who is a good character is linked to those ideas. Anyone who is an evil character is linked to the opposites to those things. And then Macbeth seems to be talking to himself here about his internal conflict. While he spends time talking to himself here, Duncan's still alive. Macbeth worries that by waiting, talking and thinking, that will take the heat, it will take the emotion out of the actions he's about to do. If the heat and the emotions are gone, he's worried that he won't be able to commit the regicide. And then we've spoken about rhyming couplets before. Shakespeare uses those to give us important information. This information here is vital. Macbeth knows that what he's about to do is wrong. He knows that also he doesn't truly want to do it, but he knows that he has to if he's going to seize the crown. Then we've got the signal, the time has come. Macbeth is to proceed and kill Duncan. Then we're straight back to that done sound. So we've got the signal to proceed, and then we're back to talking about things that have to be done. We've seen that throughout Act 1 with the idea of fated acts. That's the same here, but also Macbeth just needs to get this done. He needs to get it over with before he crumbles again. He hopes here that the bell that's just rang won't wake Duncan up. And then we've got another rhyming couplet for emphasis. The death knell summons Macbeth on to commit the crime, but it also summons Duncan to heaven or to hell, which suggests that Macbeth doesn't really care what happens to Duncan after death. All that Macbeth cares about here is seizing the throne for himself. There's also a possibility here that Macbeth's addressing himself in the future, maybe. So Duncan is a good, gracious, loyal king. He's pretty much destined to go to heaven because of how good he's been in life. Macbeth is about to go against God and kill his chosen ruler. So Macbeth, it's pretty safe to assume, he's destined for hell from this point on. Okay, at this point, if you've got any extra notes that you feel would be useful, please add them onto your scripts. If there's anything that you think would help other people, could you also add that into the comment section below? And same as usual, you can find us over on Instagram at OpenBookPC. And please don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel. It will really help us out and also help other people out as they can try and get some access to this revision aid as well. I will see you next time in Act 2, Scene 2 to see the aftermath of regicide, to see how that affects Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, and to see how it will affect the plot of the play going forward.